Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. For centuries, Western epistemology, the study of knowledge, has been predicated on the notion that knowledge is a mirror reflecting an external objective reality. In the traditional classroom, this perspective plays out as a simple transmission model. The teacher, possessing objective facts, pours those facts into the student, who is seen as an empty vessel waiting to be filled. It is an appealingly straightforward system, but one that often fails to account for genuine understanding. Enter Ernst von Glasersfeld, 1917 to 2010, a brilliant thinker whose work, known as Radical Constructivism, RC, kicks the legs out from under this traditional view. Radical Constructivism is not just another flavor of educational reform. It is first and foremost a theory of knowing that fundamentally changes the question we ask about knowledge. Instead of asking, does this knowledge accurately reflect reality? Glasersfeld urges us to ask, does this knowledge work for the knower? He was heavily influenced by Jean Piaget's work on cognitive development and the philosophical insights of Giambattista Vico, who famously stated, "Verum esse ipsum factum." The truth is the very fact of having made it. For Glasersfeld, the radical part boils down to a strict adherence to two central principles. 1. Knowledge is not passively received, but actively constructed by the cognizing subject. And 2. The function of cognition is adaptive, serving the organization of the individual's experiential world, not the discovery of an objective, ontological reality. We will drill down into these foundational tenets, exploring how the concept of viability replaces truth as the benchmark for knowledge. We will dissect the profound critique RC offers to the conventional, transmission-based educational model. Finally, we will examine the transformative, often challenging, implications RC holds for the classroom, repositioning the teacher as a facilitator, the student as an active meaning maker, and learning itself as a continuous process of fitting conceptual structures to the constraints of experience. Radical constructivism, in essence, forces us to come to grips with the deeply personal and adaptive nature of human understanding, offering a compelling roadmap for fostering learning that sticks with you long after the textbook is closed. To fully appreciate the scope of radical constructivism, we must come to grips with what Glasersfeld was arguing against: trivial realism, the everyday assumption that our sensory perceptions give us a direct, unmediated picture of an external reality that exists independently of us. RC parts company with this view at a fundamental level, asserting that the human nervous system acts as a closed system. It can only process sensory input to build internal conceptual structures. It cannot check those structures against an external, independent reality. Glasersfeld makes a crucial distinction between objective reality, often called ontological reality, in the experiential world. Ontological reality is the world in itself, the true mind-independent universe. According to RC, humans can never know this reality directly. The long and short of it is that any attempt to verify internal knowledge against external reality would require us to step outside our own sensory and conceptual systems, an impossibility. We can never know if the mental image of a tree we construct truly matches the ultimate objective nature of the tree itself. This leads to the first main pillar of radical constructivism. Knowledge is actively constructed by the cognizing subject. Knowledge does not come ready-made from the world. It is generated by the individual's cognitive operations as they interact with their environment. Learning, therefore, is not about receiving information. It is about making sense of experiences. The core concept of viability. Since knowledge cannot be judged by its correspondence to an objective truth, Glasersfeld proposes an alternative criterion: viability. A conceptual structure, an idea, or a skill is considered viable if it fits the constraints of the knower's experiential world. It doesn't have to be true in an absolute sense. It just has to be useful. The concept of viability is where the rubber meets the road in RC. It is often explained through the analogy of a lock and key, but with a twist. The traditional view suggests that the key, knowledge, must be an exact replica of the lock, reality. Glasersfeld counters that for the key to be viable, it merely needs to be shaped in such a way that it does not run up against the constraints of the lock, allowing the mechanism to turn. There may be many keys, different forms of knowledge, that can open the same lock, solve the same problem, or predict the same phenomenon, and they are all equally viable. Viability is rooted in functional fit, not representational match. If a conceptual model enables a learner to predict future experiences, successfully achieve a goal, or avoid undesirable outcomes, then that model is viable. End of story. Glasersfeld built heavily upon the work of Jean Piaget, particularly the concepts of assimilation and accommodation. These mechanisms describe the cognitive processes involved in constructing and modifying knowledge structures, or schemas. 1. Assimilation. This is the process of integrating new experiences into existing cognitive structures. If a student sees a new dog and recognizes it as a dog based on their existing dog schema, they have assimilated the experience. 2. Accommodation. This occurs when an existing structure proves unviable, i.e., it leads to an unexpected result, or a perturbation. The cognizing subject must then modify the existing structure, or construct a new one, to account for the mismatch. If a student encounters a cat for the first time and tries to assimilate it into the dog's schema, maybe calling it a small dog, and then finds that their action schema, e.g., trying to throw a stick for it, fails or leads to an unexpected consequence, the cat runs away differently. They must accommodate by creating a new separate cat schema. In the RC framework, learning is a continuous cycle of assimilation and accommodation, driven by the individual's need to neutralize perturbations and maintain equilibration, a state of cognitive balance. This active, self-regulatory process is the second main pillar of RC. The function of cognition is adaptive and serves the organization of the experiential world, not the discovery of ontological reality. The shift from truth to viability is not just a philosophical parlor game. It has profound disruptive consequences for education. Radical constructivism takes aim at the entrenched practices of the traditional, transmission-based classroom, often referred to as the bucket theory of mind. The traditional model assumes that knowledge is a commodity, a package of meaning that can be seamlessly transmitted from the teacher's mind or the textbook's pages directly into the student's mind via language. Glasersfeld argues that this is an unwarranted assumption. Language is not a conduit, it is a trigger. When a teacher speaks, the words they use do not convey their exact meaning. Instead, they trigger the listener, the student, to construct a meaning based on their own unique, previously built conceptual structures. The teacher's words act as constraints that guide the student's construction, but the final construct is always the student's own. Think of it this way. When a teacher says a triangle is a polygon with 3 sides, every student hears the same words, but the meaning each student constructs is filtered through their individual experience with shapes, lines, and geometry. A student who has only ever worked with concrete manipulatives will have a different experiential foundation than one who has only seen pictures in a book. The teacher's goal is not to force the student to match the textbook definition, but to create constraints through examples, problems, and discussion that lead the student to build a definition that is viable for solving triangular problems. In the traditional classroom, a misconception is treated as an error, a failure of the student to properly ingest the objective truth. For example, a student might believe that force is necessary to keep an object moving, an Aristotelian view, not a Newtonian one. RC flips the script. A misconception, in the constructivist view, is a viable construction that works within the student's limited experiential world. The student's idea that force keeps things moving works every time they push a shopping cart or ride a bicycle. The construction only becomes unviable when they encounter a thought experiment involving frictionless space, or when they are asked to predict the motion of a projectile. The pedagogical error of the transmission model is trying to erase the misconception and replace it with the correct concept. The RC approach, by contrast, seeks to create a perturbation, an experience that demonstrates the current concept's unviability. This perturbation sets the stage for genuine accommodation, forcing the student to reorganize their cognitive structures. The student must come to the realization themselves that their current model won't cut it anymore. Glasersfeld's critique extends forcefully to assessment. Standardized testing and multiple-choice quizzes are often designed to measure the fidelity of the student's internal representation against an objective answer key. They reward regurgitation, the ability to reproduce the teacher's words, rather than genuine understanding, the ability to use knowledge viably in novel situations. RC suggests that if two students arrive at the same solution to a complex problem, their underlying conceptual structures may be wildly different, yet both are equally viable. Traditional testing misses this crucial depth, focusing only on the final output. The constructivist teacher, therefore, must get creative with assessment, using methods like interviews, open-ended projects, and portfolios to infer the viability and complexity of the student's personal construction, rather than just grading the final answer. If knowledge is constructed, not received, and if the goal of learning is viability, not truth, then the structure, roles, and interactions within the classroom must undergo a radical transformation. The RC classroom bears little resemblance to its traditional counterpart. Glasersfeld famously recast the teacher's role, shifting them from a mechanic of knowledge transfer to a midwife in the birth of understanding. This metaphor is right on the money. A midwife doesn't transfer the baby. She helps create the optimal conditions for the birth to occur naturally and safely. The RC teacher's responsibilities break down into four main areas. 1. Diagnosing existing structures. The teacher must constantly try to infer what the student's current conceptual models are, often through careful listening and questioning. This gives the teacher a bead on where the student is coming from. 2. Orchestrating perturbations. The teacher designs activities, problems, and experiments that will challenge the student's existing yet limited conceptions. These are not trick questions, but rather genuine hurdles that expose the unviability of their current schemas. 3. Providing viable contexts, scaffolding. When a student is struggling, the teacher doesn't just hand-hoover the answer. Instead, they provide context-specific guidance, tools or hints, scaffolding, that help the student get back on track and build a new, more viable schema on their own. 4. Facilitating social negotiation. While RC is radical, focusing on the individual's construction, Glasersfeld recognized that humans live in a consensual domain. We rely on shared language and shared viable constructions, like arithmetic rules, to function socially. The teacher encourages discussion and collaboration, allowing students to test the viability of their ideas not just against the physical environment, but also against the conceptual structures of their peers. In the RC model, the student takes center stage as the active, cognosing subject. The passive student, who simply sits back and waits to be lectured, is an impossibility. Learning gets rolling when the student feels a perturbation, a conflict between their expectations and their experience. This intrinsic motivation, the need to restore equilibrium, is the real engine of learning. The constructivist student investigates and explores. They are encouraged to ask what if and how does this work. Reflects. They constantly reflect on their actions, comparing the outcome to their initial expectations to identify perturbations. Takes ownership. They understand that their knowledge is their own creation, giving them a vested interest in its quality and viability. An RC-aligned curriculum throws out the idea of simply covering content page by page. Instead, it focuses on complex, authentic, ill-structured problems that mirror real-world challenges. 1. Problem-based learning, PBL, and inquiry. These methodologies are a natural fit for RC. Students are presented with a central problem they do not yet have the tools to solve. This generates the necessary cognitive perturbation and gets the ball rolling on self-directed knowledge construction. 2. Contextual relevance. The material must be relevant to the student's experiential world. Asking a mathematics student to calculate the trajectory of a rocket, if they are interested in space, is far more likely to engage them in building viable geometric concepts than simply working through abstract proofs. 3. Microworlds and simulations. These environments, especially effective in online education, as the search results point out, allow students to test their hypotheses and see the consequences of their conceptual structures instantly and safely, thus providing immediate feedback on viability. The environment itself provides the constraints that keep students honest about their constructions.